The cargo bay smelled like rust and fear. Daniel Carter stood with his back straight and his hand resting near his pistol. He did not like this place. He did not like this mission. But a job was a job, and the Earth Coalition Marines always finished what they started. The year was 2347. Humanity had spread across dozens of star systems in the past 3 centuries. They had met aliens, traded with them, and sometimes fought them. The galaxy had learned one important thing about humans. They were stubborn, unpredictable, and strangely loyal to those they called friends. Daniel was a sergeant in Bravo Squad, a small unit of soldiers who took contracts across the galaxy. Today, their contract was simple. Deliver a ransom payment. Collect a prisoner. Go home. Simple jobs, Daniel had learned, were never actually simple. Lieutenant Amy Vance stood beside him. She was a thin woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She had led Bravo Squad through impossible missions before. Her hand rested on her rifle, and her eyes moved constantly, watching every shadow in the massive cargo bay. Behind them, Corporal Kevin Torres guarded the ransom. It sat in heavy metal containers filled with rare minerals and quantum processors worth more than most colony worlds. Someone had paid a fortune to free one prisoner. Daniel did not know who the buyer was. He did not ask. That was not his job. His job was to make sure the exchange happened without anyone dying. The Crimson Vertex was a space station on the edge of Draxan territory. It was a lawless place where criminals, smugglers, and worse gathered to do business away from the eyes of any government. The station was old and ugly, built from the scraps of 100 different ships welded together over centuries. The air recyclers wheezed and groaned. The lights flickered. Daniel hated every inch of it. The Draxan arrived exactly on time. They were insectoid creatures, tall and covered in hard black shells. They had too many legs and too many eyes, and they made clicking sounds when they talked. Daniel had fought Draxan before. They were fast, strong, and completely without mercy. They viewed other species as tools to be used or meat to be eaten. The leader of the group was called Sub-Warlord Vrex. He was larger than the others, with red markings on his shell that showed his rank. He clicked and chittered, and a translation device on his chest turned his words into flat, mechanical English. "You have the payment?" Rex asked. Amy stepped forward. "We have it. Show us the prisoner." Rex made a gesture with one of his many arms. 2 soldiers dragged a figure forward and threw her onto the metal floor. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin was silver and seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. She had 4 eyes, all of them a deep violet color. Her hair was long and white, falling around her face like silk. She wore robes that had once been fine, but were now torn and stained with dirt and blood. But it was the way she held herself that struck Daniel most. She was on her knees, bound in glowing energy shackles, surrounded by enemies who could kill her in an instant. And yet she did not look afraid. She looked angry. She looked like a queen who had been temporarily inconvenienced. Princess Zalith Voran of the Volanthi Empire raised her head and looked directly at Daniel. Her 4 violet eyes met his 2 brown ones. Something passed between them in that moment. He was not sure what it was. Recognition, perhaps. Or understanding. She was studying him, measuring him, looking for a way out. "The prisoner is healthy," Rex said. "As agreed. Now show me the payment." Kevin opened the containers. The rare minerals inside gleamed under the cargo bay lights. Rex's compound eyes glittered with greed. He moved forward, running his clawed hands through the treasure, clicking with satisfaction. "Acceptable," he said. "The exchange will proceed." Daniel let out a small breath. Maybe this would go smoothly after all. Then Rex's communicator buzzed. He stepped away to answer it. Daniel watched him carefully. The sub-warlord's body language changed. He went stiff. His clicking became faster, more agitated. When he turned back to face the humans, his eyes had gone cold. "There has been a change," Rex said. "High Warlord Kethros has issued new orders. The princess will not be released. She is too valuable." Amy's hand tightened on her rifle. "We had a deal. The deal is cancelled. The ransom will be kept as compensation for our trouble. The princess will return to her cell." Rex made another gesture. "Kill the humans." Everything happened very fast. Daniel did not think. He simply moved. He hit the emergency beacon on his armor, sending a distress signal that would reach any human ship within range. Then he grabbed the princess, pulling her to her feet and dragging her toward the nearest exit behind him. Gunfire erupted. Amy and Kevin opened fire on the Draxon, their weapons blazing. Alien soldiers fell, but more were coming, pouring into the cargo bay from every entrance. "Move!" Amy shouted. "Get her out of here." Daniel ran. The princess stumbled beside him, her bound hands making it hard to keep her balance. He half carried her through a doorway and into a narrow corridor beyond. The crimson vertex was a maze. Corridors twisted and turned in every direction. Daniel had studied the station's layout before the mission, memorizing every possible escape route. Now that knowledge saved their lives as he led the princess through back passages and maintenance tunnels. Behind them, he could hear the clicking of Draxon soldiers in pursuit. They were fast. They were getting closer. The princess spoke for the first time. Her voice was low and musical, with an accent Daniel did not recognize. "They will not let us leave," she said. "Kethros wants me too badly." "Then Kethros is going to be disappointed," Daniel replied. He did not know why he said it. He did not know if it was true. The odds were against them. The entire station would be hunting them within minutes. They had no ship, no backup, and no way out. But Daniel Carter had a simple rule. He did not leave people behind. He did not break contracts. He had been paid to deliver this princess safely, and that was exactly what he intended to do. Even if it killed him, they ran deeper into the station, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them, and Daniel tried not to think about how impossible this had all become. The second assault came at sunset. The sky turned red and orange as thousands of Draxon soldiers poured into the valley from every direction. This time, there was no pause, no negotiation. Kethros wanted them dead, and he was sending everything he had to make it happen. Daniel fought from behind his barricade, firing into the endless wave of black shells. His arms burned from exhaustion. His eyes stung from smoke and sweat. But he kept pulling the trigger, kept watching enemies fall, kept hoping that somehow they would survive long enough for rescue to arrive. Peters went down first. A Draxon blade caught him in the chest as he tried to reload. Daniel saw him fall and could do nothing to help. The young soldier had fought bravely. He had held his position until the very end. Now he was gone. Kevin detonated his last explosives, collapsing an entire section of the valley wall onto the advancing Draxon. Hundreds died in the rockslide. But Kevin caught a piece of shrapnel in his side and dropped to the ground. Bleeding badly, Amy ran to him, abandoning her sniper position to drag him back to cover. She took a shot to the shoulder in the process, the energy bolt burning through her armor and into the flesh beneath. She did not cry out. She just kept moving, pulling Kevin behind the wreckage of the freighter. The defensive line was collapsing. Daniel and the princess were the only ones still fighting at the front. They stood back to back, firing in every direction, surrounded by a sea of enemies. "I never thought I would die on a world I had never heard of," the princess said between shots. "You are not going to die," Daniel replied. "Not today. You cannot promise that. Watch me." A Draxan soldier broke through their defense and lunged at Daniel with a curved blade. He dodged, but the blade caught his arm, cutting deep. Blood poured from the wound. He dropped his rifle. The princess spun and shot the soldier in the head. She grabbed Daniel and pulled him backward, away from the advancing enemy. "Fall back to the ship," she ordered. They retreated to the crashed freighter, where Amy was trying to stop Kevin's bleeding with one hand while holding her pistol with the other. Kevin was pale and barely conscious, but he managed a weak smile when he saw Daniel. "Still alive?" Kevin asked. "Still alive," Daniel said. "Good. I have one more surprise for them." He held up a small detonator, his last explosive. He had strapped it to the freighter's fuel cells when no one was watching. If the Draxan got through, he was going to take as many of them as possible with him. Amy shook her head. "You crazy fool. Just planning ahead." The Draxan surrounded them. There was nowhere else to retreat. Daniel counted maybe 50 rounds of ammunition between all of them. Against thousands of enemies, it was nothing. This was it. This was how it ended. Daniel looked at the princess. She was watching him with those strained violet eyes, and he saw something in them that he did not expect. Not fear, not regret, gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not giving up on me." "I never give up on anyone." The Draxan charged. Daniel emptied his rifle into the rushing horde. He dropped it and drew his knife, meeting the first soldier with a slash across its throat. Blood sprayed across his face, alien and cold. He killed 2 more before they overwhelmed him. He felt claws tear at his armor. He felt the weight of bodies pressing down on him. He heard the princess scream his name, and then everything became a blur of pain and darkness. He was going to die. He knew that now. But he had kept his promise. He had not surrendered. He had not given up. That was enough. Then the sky exploded. Daniel did not understand what was happening at first. The weight on top of him shifted. The sound of battle changed. He heard new weapons firing, weapons that sounded different from anything the Draxan used. Golden light filled the valley. He forced his eyes open and saw shapes dropping from the sky. Dozens of drop pods were falling through the clouds, each one trailing fire as it entered the atmosphere. They slammed into the ground around the battlefield, and soldiers poured out of them. Galactic soldiers, the Royal Guard. Their armor was golden and shining, and they fought with weapons that turned Draxan soldiers to ash with a single shot. They moved like dancers, graceful and deadly, tearing through the enemy ranks with incredible speed. The Draxan assault faltered. Then it broke. The alien soldiers began to retreat, climbing back toward the ridges, scrambling over the bodies of their dead. Daniel tried to stand but could not. His legs would not support him. He had broken too many bones, lost too much blood. A Volante soldier found him in the wreckage. Strong hands lifted him up and carried him toward a medical station. He caught a glimpse of the princess, surrounded by guards who were treating her like the royalty she was. Good. She was safe. That was all that mattered. But then he saw something else. Warlord Kethrus himself was on the battlefield. The massive Draxan leader was retreating toward a transport ship, surrounded by his personal guard. He was going to escape. Amy saw him too. She was lying on the ground, her shoulder wrapped in bloody bandages, but she still had her sniper rifle. She raised it with her good arm, sighted through the scope, and fired. The shot traveled 300 meters across the battlefield. It punched through Kethros's thorax and out the other side. The High Warlord stopped walking. He looked down at the hole in his chest with what might have been surprise. Then he fell face first into the mud and did not move again. The Draxan army saw their leader fall. What had been a retreat became a rout. Thousands of soldiers threw down their weapons and fled into the wilderness. The battle was over. Daniel lay on a medical stretcher, staring up at the red sky. The Lantfi medics were working on his wounds, speaking in a language he did not understand. Someone was crying nearby. Someone else was laughing. A face appeared above him. Silver skin. 4 violet eyes. White hair matted with blood and dirt. "You kept your promise," the princess said. Daniel tried to speak, but no words came out. His vision was fading. The pain was becoming distant and unreal. "Rest now," she said softly. "You have earned it." He closed his eyes. When he woke up, 3 days had passed. He was in a Volante medical facility, surrounded by technology that looked like magic. His broken bones had been healed. His wounds had been sealed. He felt weak but alive. And the princess was sitting beside his bed, watching over him like a guardian angel. "Welcome back," she said. Daniel tried to sit up. His body ached everywhere, but it obeyed his commands. He looked at himself. New scars crossed his arms and chest, souvenirs of the battle. But he was whole. "How?" he asked. "Volante medicine. Our doctors can heal almost any wound, as long as the patient is still breathing when they arrive." She paused. "You barely were. What about the others?" "Lieutenant Vance will recover. Corporal Torres lost his leg but survived. The young one called Peters did not make it." Daniel closed his eyes. Peters had been barely 20 years old. He had had a family. Back on Earth, parents who were waiting for him to come home. "I am sorry," the princess said quietly. "I am sorry that your people died for me. They died because Kethros would not let us walk away. Do not blame yourself for his evil." She nodded but did not look convinced. Daniel understood. Survivors always carried guilt. It was part of the price they paid for living. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," she said, "my father arrives, and everything changes." The Crimson Vertex had become a hunting ground. Every corridor was filled with danger. Every shadow could hide a Draxan soldier waiting to kill them. Daniel kept moving. He held the princess by the arm and guided her through the maze of passages, listening for the clicking sounds of their pursuers. The station was old and falling apart, which worked in their favor. There were hundreds of places to hide, thousands of paths to take, but the Draxan knew this station better than he did. They were closing in. His communicator crackled. Amy's voice came through, broken by static but still clear enough to understand. "Daniel, where are you?" "Maintenance level 3, he replied. "Heading toward the old docking bays." "Good. Keep moving. We lost 2 soldiers getting out of the cargo bay. Kevin is rigging explosives to slow them down. I am going to create a distraction." Daniel did not like the sound of that. "What kind of distraction?" "The kind that involves our ship. Do not wait for us. Get to docking bay 17. There is an old freighter there. Kevin says he can get it running. Amy, if you blow our ship, you will have no way out. Just do your job, Sergeant. Get the princess off this station." "That is an order." The channel went dead. Daniel swore under his breath, but kept moving. Amy Vance was the best officer he had ever served under. If she said she had a plan, he had to trust her. The princess ran beside him without complaint. Her hands were still bound, and her legs were weak from weeks of captivity, but she pushed herself to keep pace. Daniel noticed that she was watching everything around them, studying the corridors, the access panels, the ventilation shafts. She was looking for advantages. "You are not what I expected," she said quietly as they ran. "What did you expect?" "Humans have a reputation. You are supposed to be primitive, aggressive, violent without purpose." Daniel almost laughed. "We can be all of those things, but we are also stubborn, and we finish what we start." An explosion echoed through the station. The walls shook. Somewhere behind them, Amy had started her distraction. Daniel heard alarms begin to wail, and the lights flickered and went. Red dot good. Chaos was their friend right now. They reached a junction where 4 corridors met. Daniel paused, trying to remember the station layout. The princess suddenly grabbed his arm and pulled him back against the wall. "Wait," she whispered. Seconds later, 3 Draxan soldiers ran past the junction. They did not see Daniel, and the princess pressed against the wall in the shadows. When they were gone, the princess released his arm. "Good ears," Daniel said. "The Lanthi have better hearing than humans. Also better vision. Your species is remarkably limited. And yet here I am, rescuing you." She had no answer for that. They moved on. The corridors became narrower and dirtier as they went deeper into the station's old sections. These areas had not been used in decades. Dust covered every surface, and the air was stale and thin. Docking Bay 17 was a forgotten place, filled with old ships that no one had bothered to remove. Most of them were nothing but scrap metal now. But in the far corner, Daniel saw a freighter that still looked intact. It was ugly and battered, but its hull was solid. Kevin Torres emerged from a doorway, his face covered in grease and sweat. Behind him came Amy and one other soldier, a young man named Peters, who was bleeding from a wound in his leg. "The ship is ready," Kevin said. "Barely. The engines will run, but I am not making any promises about where we end up." "It does not matter," Amy said. "Anywhere is better than here." Another explosion shook the station. This one was closer. The Draxan were using heavy weapons now, blasting through walls to find them faster. Daniel helped the princess into the freighter, while Kevin ran final checks on the engines. The interior was cramped and smelled like old fuel, but Daniel did not care. It had seats and it could fly. That was enough. Amy took the pilot's seat. She was not a trained pilot, but she had flown enough ships in emergencies to manage the basics. Kevin took the co-pilot position and began working on the navigation computer. "Hang on," Amy said. "This is going to be rough." She fired up the engines. The freighter groaned and shuddered like an old man getting out of bed. For a terrible moment, Daniel thought it would not move. Then the ship lurched forward, crashing through the docking bay doors and into open space. Behind them, the crimson vertex grew smaller. Daniel saw explosions blossoming across the station's surface. Amy's distraction had worked too well. The whole station was falling apart, but they were not safe yet. Draxan patrol ships were launching to pursue them. Daniel saw their lights in the distance, growing closer. "Kevin, I need that navigation computer working now," Amy said. "I am trying. This system is older than my grandmother." The princess suddenly stood up and moved to the navigation console. She pushed Kevin aside and began entering commands. Her bound hands moved awkwardly, but her fingers were fast and precise. "What are you doing?" Kevin demanded. "Saving your lives. I studied ancient navigation systems as a child. This computer uses Volanti code from 2 centuries ago." She pressed a final button. "There, you have a destination now." The computer screen changed. A planet appeared, along with a hyperspace route. "Vera 7, Amy read. "That is a war zone. Draxan and Volanti forces have been fighting there for months. It is the closest habitable world," the princess said. "And my people are there. If we can reach the Volanti lines, we will be safe." It was not a good option, but it was the only option they had. "Do it," Daniel said. Amy engaged the hyperspace drive. The stars stretched into lines of light, and the freighter shot forward into the void between worlds. The Draxan patrol ships vanished behind them. For a few hours, they traveled in silence. Daniel found a toolkit and used it to remove the energy shackles from the princess's wrists. She rubbed the raw skin where the restraints had been, and for the first time, she looked at him without suspicion. "Thank you," she said. "Do not thank me yet. We still have to land on a planet where 2 armies are trying to kill each other." The princess smiled. It was a small smile, tired and sad, but it changed her face completely. She looked younger when she smiled. More real. I never asked your name, she said. Daniel. Daniel Carter. Daniel Carter. I will remember that name. The hyperspace journey ended with a violent jolt. The freighter dropped back into normal space, and Vera 7 appeared in front of them, a green and brown world scarred by war. Then the alarms started screaming. The ship had been damaged during their escape. The hull was cracked. The engines were failing. They were going to crash. Amy fought with the controls, trying to aim for a clear area between the battle lines. Kevin shouted readings from the damaged sensors. Daniel held onto a support beam and watched the planet grow larger through the window. The landing was not a landing. It was a controlled disaster. The freighter hit the ground at an angle, bounced twice, and then slid across a muddy field before finally stopping. Against a pile of rocks, Daniel pulled himself up from where he had fallen. His head was bleeding and his ribs hurt, but he was alive. Around him, the others were groaning and stirring. They had made it to Verath-7. Now they just had to survive. The smoke rose from the crashed freighter in a thick black column that could be seen for miles. Daniel knew that both armies on this planet would notice it. He did not have much time. He climbed out of the wreckage and looked around. They had landed in a shallow valley between two ridges. In the distance to the north, he could see the golden banners of the Volante defensive lines. To the south, the dark mass of the Draxan invasion force spread across the horizon like a plague. They were directly in the middle. No Man's Land. Amy emerged from the freighter, helping Kevin walk. The corporal had hurt his ankle in the crash, but was already joking about it. Peters followed, his wounded leg wrapped in emergency bandages. The princess came last, her silver skin smudged with dirt and her white hair tangled. How far to the Volante lines? Daniel asked her. She studied the terrain with her 4 violet eyes. Perhaps 15 kilometers. Too far to walk before the Draxan find us. Then we do not walk. We defend. Amy looked at him like he had lost his mind. Defend? With 4 soldiers and a princess? Against how many Draxan? However many they send. Daniel's voice was calm. We have cover from the wreckage. We have weapons and ammunition. We hold this position until help arrives, or until there is no one left to hold it. Kevin laughed, a short and bitter sound. You are insane. You know that? Probably. Start rigging explosives around the perimeter. Use whatever you can find. They worked through the morning, turning the crash site into a defensive position. Daniel used wreckage from the freighter to create barriers and firing positions. Kevin planted explosives at key points around the valley, creating traps that would slow down any assault. Amy found a high point on a pile of rocks where she could use her rifle scope to watch for enemies. Peters, despite his wounded leg, helped move ammunition and supplies. The princess worked beside him, saying nothing but carrying her share of the load. When the sun reached its highest point, the position was ready. It was not much. A few walls of twisted metal, some trenches dug into the mud, a handful of explosive traps. Against a full Draxan assault force, it would last maybe an hour, but Daniel had no intention of dying quietly. The first Draxan scouts appeared in the early afternoon. Daniel watched them through his binoculars, counting their numbers. 12 soldiers on fast-moving vehicles, probably sent to investigate the smoke. They stopped at the edge of the valley and studied the wreckage for a long time. Then they reported back to their commanders, and everything changed. Within 2 hours, the valley was surrounded by Draxan soldiers. Daniel could see thousands of them massing on the southern ridge. Their weapons gleamed in the sunlight. Their clicking voices filled the air like the sound of a swarm of insects. The princess stood beside him, watching the enemy army gather. They should just go around us, she said quietly. We are not worth this many soldiers. They are not here for strategic reasons, Daniel replied. They are here because Kethris wants you back. And because we embarrassed him by escaping. Embarrassed him? We killed a dozen of his soldiers and blew up half a space station. Like I said, embarrassed. She almost smiled, almost thought Amy approached them, her rifle slung over her shoulder. I count at least 5,000 in the first wave. More coming from the south. This is going to be very bad. Worse than the siege of New Helsinki? Kevin asked. We had tanks at New Helsinki. Here we have one corporal with a sore ankle and some mining explosives. I also have a very positive attitude. That will definitely stop the alien horde. Daniel checked his rifle one more time. Fully loaded. Plenty of ammunition. Not enough to kill 5,000 enemies, but enough to make them work for their victory. The Draxen did not attack immediately. Instead, a holographic projector activated in the middle of no man's land. A massive image appeared, flickering in the afternoon light. High Warlord Kethros himself. Daniel had seen pictures of the Draxen leader before. Kethros was huge, nearly 3 meters tall, with a shell as black as midnight and eyes that burned with cruel intelligence. He had conquered a dozen worlds. He had enslaved millions. He was considered one of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. And now he was talking to a handful of humans defending a crashed ship. Small creatures, Kethros said, his translation device giving his words a cold and mechanical tone. You have caused me great trouble. You have taken something that belongs to me. I am impressed by your courage. Impressed and amused. Daniel stepped forward so the sensors on the projector could see him. The princess does not belong to anyone. Especially not you. Kethros made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. Brave words from a dead man. But I am not without mercy. Surrender the princess now, and I will allow you to leave this world alive. I will even pay you for your trouble. More money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Behind Daniel, the squad was silent. He knew they were waiting to hear what he would say. He knew that any sane person would take the deal. They were outnumbered thousands to 1. They had no hope of victory. Taking the money and walking away was the smart choice. Daniel had never been very smart. Here's my counteroffer, he said. Turn around. Take your army back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Leave this planet and never bother the Volanthi again. He paused. And while you are at it, you can take your money and shove it somewhere uncomfortable. The silence that followed was complete. Even the clicking of the Draxen soldiers stopped. No one in the galaxy spoke to High Warlord Kethros that way. Kethros's eyes burned brighter. So be it. You will die screaming, human. All of you will die screaming. And then I will take the princess anyway. The hologram vanished. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Kevin let out a low whistle. That was either very brave or very stupid, he said. Probably both, Amy replied. Everyone get to positions. They are coming. The Draxen army began to move. Thousands of soldiers advanced down the ridge, their weapons raised, their bodies forming a wave of black shells and gleaming blades. The ground shook under their feet. Daniel took his position behind a wall of wreckage. The princess crouched beside him. She had picked up a rifle from one of their fallen soldiers and was checking its charge. You should stay back, Daniel said. No, her voice was firm. I am tired of being protected. I am tired of being a prize to be won or lost. If I am going to die today, I will die fighting. There was no time to argue. The first wave of Draxen reached the outer perimeter. Kevin's explosives detonated in a chain of massive blasts. The ground collapsed beneath hundreds of enemy soldiers, burying them in mud and stone. The Draxen advance faltered for a moment, confused by the sudden destruction. Then Amy began firing from her elevated position. Her shots were precise and deadly, each one finding a target. Draxen commanders fell, their bodies crumpling as high-powered rounds punched through their armor. The squad opened fire. The valley became a storm of light and sound as weapons blazed in every direction. Draxan soldiers fell in waves, but more kept coming, climbing over the bodies of their dead to reach the human positions. Daniel fired until his rifle overheated. He grabbed another weapon and kept firing. Beside him, the princess fought with a calm determination that surprised him. She was a good shot, better than most soldiers he had known. The first assault lasted 2 hours. When it was over, hundreds of Draxan lay dead in the valley, but the humans were still standing. Peters had taken a shot to the arm and could barely hold his rifle. Kevin was limping worse than before. Amy had run through half her ammunition, but they had held. Daniel looked at the princess. She was covered in mud and alien blood, her silver skin almost invisible under the grime. But her violet eyes were clear and steady. "Still alive," he said. "Still alive," she agreed. On the ridge, the Draxan were regrouping for another assault. This time, there would be even more of them. Daniel reloaded his rifle and prepared to fight again. Emperor Thalion Voran arrived on the 4th day after the battle. His ship was enormous, a golden vessel that blocked out the sun when it descended through the clouds. It carried a diplomatic delegation of over 1,000 Volanti nobles, advisors and servants. The emperor himself was ancient by any standard. He had ruled his people for over 300 years, guiding them through wars and plagues and disasters. His silver skin had faded to pale gray with age, and his 4 eyes were clouded with the weight of centuries. But he still moved with the dignity of a man who had commanded empires. He came to the medical facility where Daniel was recovering. The emperor's guards tried to stop him, saying it was beneath his station to visit a common soldier. Thalion ignored them. He walked through the doors alone and stood at the foot of Daniel's bed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel had faced alien warriors, survived impossible battles, and stared death in the face more times than he could count. But lying in a hospital bed while an emperor looked down at him was somehow more terrifying than all of that. "You are the human who saved my daughter," Thalion said at last. His voice was deep and musical, like water flowing over ancient stones. "I did not do it alone," Daniel replied. "My squad fought beside me. They paid a higher price than I did. So, I have been told." Lieutenant Vance, Corporal Torres, the young soldier Peters who gave his life. Thalion shook his head slowly. "Your people are remarkable. Foolish, perhaps, but remarkable. We prefer the word stubborn." Something that might have been a smile crossed the emperor's face. "Stubborn. Yes, that word suits you." He gestured, and servants hurried forward carrying cases made of polished wood. They opened the cases, revealing treasures beyond anything Daniel had ever seen. Precious gems, rare metals, documents that promised land and titles in the Volanti Empire. "I wish to reward you," Thalion said. "All of you. Whatever you desire, it is yours. Wealth, property, citizenship in my empire. Name your price, and I will pay it." Daniel looked at the treasures. A year ago, he had been a poor soldier from a failed farm, taking contracts across the galaxy just to survive. These rewards could change his life forever. He could retire in luxury. He could buy his family's farm back and still have enough left over to live like a king. He thought about Peters, who would never spend a credit of reward money. He thought about Kevin, who had lost his leg in the battle. He thought about Amy, who was even now negotiating with Volanti, officers about the future of human-alien relations. And he thought about the princess, who was standing in the doorway, watching him with those violet eyes. "No," Daniel said. The emperor blinked. In 300 years of rule, no one had ever refused a gift from him before. His advisors looked at each other in confusion. "I do not understand," Thalion said. You risked your life for my daughter. Your friends died protecting her. You have earned whatever reward you ask for. I did not do it for a reward." Daniel sat up straighter in his bed. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because she needed help, and I could provide it. That is what humans do. We help people. We protect people. Not for money or glory, but because it matters." The Emperor stared at him for a long time. Daniel could not read his expression. Velante faces were different from human faces, harder to interpret. "You are the strangest creature I have ever met," Tholian said finally. "And I have met many strange creatures in my long life. I will take that as a compliment." The Emperor laughed. It was a small sound, rusty from disuse, but genuine. He waved his servants away, and they closed the cases and retreated with their treasures. "Perhaps there is something else I can offer you," Tholian said. "Something more valuable than gold or land. Friendship between our peoples. An alliance that could change the galaxy. That is not my decision to make. I am just a sergeant. You are more than that, Daniel Carter. Whether you accept it or not." Tholian turned to leave, then paused at the door. "My daughter has been watching over you since you arrived. Day and night. She refuses to leave your side." Daniel glanced at the princess. She had not moved from the doorway. Her face was calm, but something in her eyes gave her away. "She is stubborn," Tholian continued. "Like you, perhaps. I wonder where that will lead." He left without another word. His delegation followed, sweeping out of the medical facility like a golden tide. Daniel was alone with the princess. She walked slowly to his bedside and sat down in the chair she had occupied for the past 4 days. Her hands were folded in her lap, but he could see them trembling slightly. "You refused his gifts," she said. "They did not feel right. Most beings would have taken the wealth and run. I am not most beings." She nodded, as if she had expected that answer. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It felt like the silence between two people who understood each other without needing words. "I have been thinking," the princess said at last, "about what happens next. About what I want, and what do you want?" She looked at him, and Daniel saw something in her 4 violet eyes that made his heart beat faster. Determination, hope, and something else. Something deeper that he could not quite name. "In the old traditions of my people," she said, "there was a custom among warriors. When one warrior saved another's life in battle, the survivor could offer a bond, a partnership. Not as servant and master, but as equals. I did not know that. It is an ancient practice. My father's generation considers it outdated. Foolish romanticism from a more primitive time." She paused. "But I have always believed that the old ways had wisdom that we have forgotten." She stood up and knelt beside his bed. Her silver hand reached out and took his scarred human hand. Her skin was cool and smooth against his rough fingers. "You paid for my release with blood and courage," she said softly. "You asked for nothing in return. You fought impossible odds and refused to surrender, even when death was certain. I have never met anyone like you." Daniel's throat was tight. He could not speak. "Now take me too," she continued. "Not as a prize or a trophy, but as a partner. As someone who will stand beside you through whatever comes next. That is my offer. That is my promise." Daniel looked at her. He barely knew her. They had spoken perhaps 100 words to each other before this moment. Their species were different, their cultures were different, and their worlds were different. But he had seen who she truly was on that battlefield. He had seen her fight with courage and fire. He had seen her refuse to be helpless, refuse to be a victim. She was brave, clever, fierce, and kind. And she was looking at him like he was the only person in the universe who mattered. "I am just a soldier," he said. I do not have wealth or titles. I cannot give you the life you are used to. I do not want the life I am used to. I want something new, something real." Her grip on his hand tightened. "I want you." Daniel Carter had made many hard decisions in his life. He had faced death, endured pain, and lost friends. But this decision, somehow, felt like the hardest of all. He squeezed her hand back. "Then you have me," he said. 1 year later, Daniel and Zalith stood on the observation deck of a diplomatic vessel, watching the stars drift past the windows. They were traveling between Earth and the Volanthi homeworld, serving as ambassadors for both their people's god. It had not been an easy year. There were those on both sides who opposed their union. There were diplomats who saw them as a threat and politicians who tried to use them as pawns. But they had faced every challenge together, just as they had faced the Draxon on Verath-7. Amy Vance had been promoted to commander. She led a new joint human Volanthi Special Forces unit that was already becoming legendary across the galaxy. Kevin Torres, despite his artificial leg, ran the unit's training program. He said the new recruits needed someone who understood what it meant to sacrifice everything for a mission. The Draxon Dominion had collapsed after Kethrus's death. Without their leader, the insectoid species had turned on each other, fighting civil wars that would consume them for generations. And Daniel, the stubborn soldier who had refused to leave anyone behind, had become something he never imagined. A symbol, a bridge between two species. A reminder that courage and loyalty could change the universe. Zalith leaned against him, her silver head resting on his shoulder. He could feel the warmth of her body through his uniform, different from human warmth but comforting nonetheless. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Refusing my father's rewards? Choosing this life instead of wealth and comfort?" Daniel thought about the question. He thought about the farm he could have bought back, the luxury he could have enjoyed. He thought about the simpler path he could have walked. Then he looked at the woman beside him, his partner, his equal. "No," he said, "not for a single moment." She smiled, and he realized that he had never seen anything more beautiful in all his travels across the galaxy. Outside the window, the stars shone with the light of countless worlds, each one full of possibilities. The universe was vast and dangerous, but they would face it together. That was the human way, and she was learning that it was a very good way to live.